Ric, thank you so much for being with us here today. I'll now turn it over to Professor Lim and Ric for their conversation. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Ric, thank you for being here and welcome to UF. I now know why you're really here, but this is the other big reason why we're here, to talk about how we can disagree better, because I think the undergirding premise is that we do disagree, and there are ways of disagreeing better or worse. And I think I am personally very interested in exploring this with you. So, but before you do that, tell us a little bit about your narrative. So, how did you, why did you get into politics, and then how it happened for you? Because I'm very curious after your Vanderbilt Law School degree, and then tell us about how public service and politics became a part of who you are.
Sure. Well, let me begin by thanking everyone by coming. Last night I was talking to my wife, and I said, in your wildest dreams, could you ever imagine me being introduced by Chief Justice Kennedy in your wildest dreams? And she said, Ric, you're not in my wildest dreams. But I began my political career at Wendy's, was the start of it in high school. I got fired after 3 days. The manager said, I don't have what it takes to make it in fast food. So what do you do when you're told you're not good enough to work at Wendy's? I felt like I only had one career option. I became a U.S. congressman. And the first step on that journey was going to college. And I grew up humble circumstances. My mom was a single parent secretary and didn't have enough money to go to college, but she had a clever idea. She said, why don't you meet with my boss and ask if his company would make a charitable contribution? So I went and made an appointment, met with Mr. Overstreet, 81 years old, president and CEO of Overstreet Investment Company. And I was 17, and I'm having this conversation, and my hands are shaking, and I said, I want to go to college so bad. I'm here today to ask your company to make a charitable contribution, and if you do, it won't be wasted. I'll graduate top of my class. And he said, son, I'm just the president. I don't make the decisions. The board makes the decisions. They meet on Tuesday morning. Come back Tuesday afternoon. I'll let you know the answer. So I come back Tuesday afternoon. I haven't slept in almost 2 days. And I feel like he walks into the room. My life turns on what happens in the next 30 seconds. And he said, well, son, the board met, and they decided that they will not help you go to college. And it's nothing personal, but the board felt if they did that for you, in fairness, they would have to do that for every other employee. The company's not set up for that. And I just said, well, thank you, Mr. Overstreet. You tried, and you didn't have to try. And as I was thanking him, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm not going to be going to college. And just tears started coming down my face. And he leaned over and said, son, you can wipe the tears away. I said, the company couldn't put you through college. I didn't say that I couldn't. With that, he stroked the check, and I was off to college. And 4 years later, graduated first in my class. That got me a scholarship to Vanderbilt Law School. And when I graduated Vanderbilt, I had one clear mission in life, and that is I wanted to go to Congress to increase financial aid, called Pell Grants, to help other poor kids go to college, just like someone had helped me. And I had two big obstacles. Number one, I didn't have any rich friends or political connections. And then number two, if I got there, you have to be a chairman to have any influence. And so when our congressman decided to run for office, higher office, I really wasn't ready. I was only 34, but it's an open seat. So I filed my papers to run for Congress, and so did everybody else, and the mayor and the state legislators. And I couldn't even pay people to work for me. They said it was a joke. I have no chance of winning. No rich friends, no political connections. I remember a debate with one of my very talented opponents who referred to me as an amateur compared to them. And I said, well, you're right. I am an amateur. But it was amateurs who built Noah's Ark and professionals who built the Titanic. And I didn't have to hear too much about that anymore. And my campaign was more like the Titanic, to be honest with you. I was failing by every criteria. I was losing by 27 points in the polls, out fundraised 4-1. The leader of my own party flew to Orlando to ask me to drop out and endorse one of the other primary candidates. I'm not saying I was dead, but that kid from the movie Sixth Sense could see me. And then got a call out of the blue from somebody I never talked before in Washington. A businessman asked me to fly up there. There was a new group of CEOs who were getting together, and they wanted to hear, in a fundraising context from members of Congress, potential. And so I went up there. I was the last one picked, finalist of 16, and I was the last one to speak. And it had been serious all day, and I said, guys, I've been in the back of the room waiting to speak for hours, and I feel like Elizabeth Taylor's seventh husband on his honeymoon night. I know what I'm supposed to do, but at this point, I don't know how to make this interesting. And they laughed for the first time that day. And somehow their laughter relaxed me. And I spoke passionately without notes, and that little talk changed my life. They ranked me #1 in the country. They spent $400,000 to support me, and a few months later, against all odds, I won a seat in the United States Congress. Now I still had the other hurdle of becoming a chairman to have influence. And I was there for about 5 years, and our chairman of the Education Committee was this unknown guy, chain smoker, drank Merlot nonstop, real tan, and his name was John Boehner. And he was a big underdog, and I was the one and only member of Congress out of 25 in Florida to support him. And he pulled off this surprising upset and won. And he came to me and he said, what do you want? I said, I'd like to be chairman of the Higher Education Committee, because I want to repay what was done for me. So he handed me the gavel and said, congratulations, Mr. Chairman. And I used that position to increase Pell Grants by 62%, and 5.5 million students got their chance to go to college. And Mr. Overstreet's single act of kindness had impacted over 5 million lives. And so that's how I got into it.
I'm not often like this, but I'm actually blown away because I received Pell Grant when I went to college. First generation college student here in the United States, and Pell Grant meant a lot for me. And you had a role in shaping the future generation, so I'm honored to be here with you, and I'm not just saying that. It wasn't part of my script, you know.
Thank
So.
you, Professor. Yeah.
So let's go to the next question then. For students interested in public service, can they still make a difference? I mean, your public service made a difference because somebody made a difference for you. Mr. Overstreet did. So is there any one piece of advice you could give? Find them, Mr. Overstreet, or?
Yes. So I'll tell you a story. I was giving a speech to some women lawyers, and afterwards this young lady came up to me. Her name is Liz, and she said that her mom's in prison in Vietnam, and that she'd gone over there for a relative's wedding. And she had given some radio interview saying, I think they should have elections in Vietnam. Well, they don't have free speech there. And so they had put her in prison, for she'd been there for a year. And she had gone to hire the biggest law firm in Florida. She went to the State Department. She begged the Vietnamese government. She got all kind of publicity, and nothing happened. And so out of desperation, she comes to me. It was a couple months before Thanksgiving. And I said, I don't know why I said this, but I said, Liz, we'll have your mom home by Thanksgiving. Something told me to say that. And I go back to Washington, and I was really surprised we had some leverage. There was a really important bill to Vietnam, Trade Promotion Authority, that was worth $10 billion to them. And I got the phone number of the top ambassador in Vietnam, and I called him. I said who I was and why I was a little upset you have my constituent. And I said, so I've stopped this bill from moving in the House, and we've got our senator has stopped it in the Senate. So it's not going anywhere. But here's a good day for you. If you let my constituent out of jail, I'll let this come to a vote. In fact, I may even vote for it. And long story short, a couple of days later, a guard appears at the jail cell door and said to Liz's mom, her name is Cook Fauché, says, Cook, you look sick. She goes, I'm not sick. He goes, we think you look sick. She goes, I'm not sick. He says, no, because we think you look sick, we've decided to set you free and send you home to America so you can get treatment. And the jail cell door opened. And she was on a plane back to Orlando, and I was there to meet with her and her daughter. It was an emotional reunion, as you might imagine, and it was a couple of days before Thanksgiving. And I know the exact date. It was November 12, 2006. And the reason I know the exact date is because every November 12th, like clockwork, for 20 years in a row, I get a ding on my cell phone early in the morning. I'm always like, who the heck is reaching out this early? And it's always the same person, and it's always Liz. And same text says, thank you. This is the day you saved my mom's life. Can you make a difference? I think you can make a difference. One piece of advice, I would say go and specialize. Bob Graham did that when he was up there. He was known for intelligence, Chairman. I focused on higher ed and Pell Grants, and that's what I would say. You can change the world, but you got to do one thing.
Do one thing indeed. All right. So for the aspiring lawyers, because we have both Bob Graham Center as well as Hamilton School, we have a lot of students are PPEL or interested in law, and you know, you're a lawyer and you are still a lawyer. So what advice, if any, would you have about how they can be persuasive advocates And I want to emphasize the word advocates.
Yeah, absolutely. The key to persuasion is that juries and judges need to believe you. And to believe you, you have to be credible. And to be credible, you have to tell the truth, the whole truth, the good side about your case and the bad side in a fair manner. And so that gives you credibility with judges and juries. You would think other people do it. They don't. 95% of lawyers get up there and they say, this is a great part about my case, and this is why Keller's case is horrible, and they just present a caricature of the other side. Well, that doesn't persuade people. Having credibility with them persuades judges and juries, and they good BS detectors. And once you have that credibility, then it's a matter of establishing your common values with the jury, which is always the common values available of fairness and compassion. And the combination of those two things, if you do those, you'll start off in the top 5%. And I've been very lucky. Juries hadn't let me down once in 25 years, just by being straight with them.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's a great advice. I should tell my lawyer that. Okay. This is wonderful conversation so far. Let's talk about some problems that we are facing in our world today. For every Mr. Overstreet, there have been some other people who try to knock you down or try to derail our pathway to flourishing and success. So, and it's true not only individually but also as a society. So the kind of erosion of civility, as you say, is a problem, and I totally agree, according to public opinion polls as well. So do you think there is a problem, and is it worse now than before? I mean, we often say that. We know that we are so polarized, we're so much more polarized than it we ever been. Is it true?
I think the erosion of civility is the number one root problem in America. 93% of Americans polled think that there is a problem with civility. 85% say that it's worse now than it was 10 years ago. And so I'll give you an example of some differences. So when I was in office, McCain and I served together, and he had a town hall meeting in October of 2008 that I'll never forget. It was at a high school in Minnesota, a couple weeks before the election, running against Obama. And his people, his rally, somebody took the microphone and they said, this is during the birther movement when people saying Obama wasn't born here, and they said, he's not a citizen, he's from Kenya, and he's a terrorist, and Muslim, and Arab, and we don't feel safe. And John McCain took back the microphone and said, ma'am, not one of those things is true. Not one. He is a citizen, not a terrorist, not any of those other things religious-wise. He's a good family man, a U.S. Senator. I think I'm much better qualified. That's why I'm running. I'd like you to vote for me. And they booed him. And then the next person got a chance to ask questions. And this person, he's a liar, he's a terrorist, blah, blah, same thing. McCain defended Obama again. And they booed him again. 10 years later, McCain died. And the day he died, the clip they showed on the national news over and over and over was the clip from that cold day in Minnesota. McCain had been a presidential nominee, a senator for 30 years, a war hero, but they said that moment was the defining moment in his career. And since I said something nice about a Republican, and let me balance it by telling you a story about a Democrat. And since we're here at the Bob Graham Center, I think I'm just going to pick Bob Graham. My first day in Congress, my first call was from Bob Graham, who asked me to come over to the Senate lunchroom to meet with him. So I said, sure. And I'm walking over there, and I got to tell you, I was a little bit nervous because all throughout my childhood, high school and college, Graham was the governor.
Yes.
And now he'd been a U.S. Senator for 3 terms. And so I got there to meet with him, and I said, I don't even know what to call you. Like, what's the etiquette? Do I say governor or senator? And he said, just call me Bob. I said, okay. Senator Bob Graham. But very warm, and he wanted to know how he could help me. He said, you just won, you're from my home state. And I told him I wanted to do Pell Grants, and he wrote it down on his famous little note sheet there. And I think it's a microcosm of the way that age was. Like, he was one of the most powerful people in Washington, chairman of the Intelligence Committee, former governor. I was nobody, just a freshman on my first day, and yet he reached out to me to say, what can I do to help? That's the spirit that we had back then that I still think is possible in the future.
So it is worse today than it was before?
It's worse today, for sure.
Okay, that's your kind of, right, okay. So Some have suggested that it's likely two major culprits might be social media and cable TV news. They have contributed to the problem. You and I think, are of the generation. Many of the students probably. Do you know a TV that you have to turn the dial, pre-remote control? Back in those days, we had NBC, ABC, CBS News.
Yes.
The anchors were there. You were you didn't have the panoply of options, whether it's MSNBC or a Fox News or CNN. So you have used the term conflict entrepreneurs. I like that. So tell us more about conflict entrepreneurship and why our students should try to avoid that.
Yeah, I think in social media and cable news, we do have these conflict entrepreneurs, meaning people get paid more by spewing hate, by getting you ticked off, by making you depressed, by playing to your conflict and your bias, your confirmation bias. And so according to public opinion polls, 7 out of 10 people blame social media, 6 out of 10 cable news. And so what's happening is on, say, Fox News, only Republicans are watching it, and they're putting the most fringe elements on there. And if you watch it, I don't care how Republican you are, it makes you depressed because you hear nonstop how horrible the other side is. They're evil. Watch MSNBC, same thing. It's them playing to the base and spewing all this negative news. And it's unfortunate because now we're more isolated. We've got Facebook friends instead of real friends. We're not a member of the bowling league or anything, and we're getting our siloed news, and it's making us look like we're so far apart, and this is horrible. And the truth is we're not that far apart in the real world. Pew Research just did a study that said 73% of tweets in politics are by 6% of the people. And I can tell you as an example, I just spent the past year at Harvard writing a book on disagreeing better, and I did a personal experiment where I decided I'm going to hang out every single night with people with different backgrounds than me, different religion, different politics, different sexual orientations. I go to the meetings of the Buddhists, of the LGBTQ rights, of psychedelic advocates. I drank beer with those people. I had wine. We went to football clubs. Football games and everything. And what I learned is that it's hard to hate up close. Yes, Harvard is incredibly liberal. 3% of professors are Republican, 77% are liberal, their own poll. But those professors are kind and they were inclusive, and so were the students. And I experienced nothing but kindness and inclusion. And that's because it's hard to hate up close. When you get to meet people face to face, you realize, okay, I'm a Republican, but I'm also a lot of things. I like yacht rock music. I like cheering for the Gators. I like going on trips. I love comedy. All of us are like that, but we over-identify sometimes, I think, with just our religion and our politics.
Over-identification, and
Yes.
I like that. Hard to hate up close.
Yes.
So our topic today is disagreeing better. So does that mean should we just argue less? Should we just kind of come up, settle ourselves in silos and not get out of there? Because if I find people that I'm going to disagree with and I'm going to end up arguing, is disagreement bad?
So what I'm going to say on that is a little bit unconventional. I think disagreement is a good thing. I think the key to bringing us together, especially during this moment in society, is to disagree better, not less. I think the competition of ideas leads to excellence. It gets you closer to the truth. It's how we decide cases in law. It's good for democracy. We need to have that debate, but it needs to be civil. And by that, I mean challenge ideas, but respect people. That's the fundamental principle. And from practicing law and being a politician for 33 years, I developed this framework called the law framework, which is a how to implement in terms of being civil.
Great. Moving to some possible solutions as you propose. So you developed something called, as you just mentioned, LAW framework. Tell us more.
So the law framework, I'll just walk through what they stand for. The L is for listen to understand. And this is understanding, not listening for the flaw, not listening to persuade, but to understand, where you define success, not whether you change someone's opinion, but whether you understand it. And it requires a little bit of humility. I'll give you just one example of what I'm talking about. I always wanted to give a TED Talk. It was on my bucket list. And I was invited to give one at the University of South Florida at Sarasota. And I'm driving down there for the first meeting, and they tell me that they've assigned a 20-year-old college student to be my mentor to teach me how to give a speech or give a better speech. And so at that point in my life, I had been a congressman for 8 years. I'd been a lawyer for 30 years. I'd given about 1,000 speeches. But on the way down, I said out loud to myself, like a crazy person, keep an open mind, keep an open mind, keep an open mind. I wanted there to be positive vibes when I met this 20-year-old student. Her name was Evelyn. And long story short, over the course of the next 6 weeks, Evelyn gave me about 9 or 10 suggestions, things that I should do differently as a speaker. And I accepted every single one of her suggestions. And you know what? It's the best speech I've ever given. It's called The Power of Self-Deprecating Humor. It became the 6th most watched TEDx talk in the world in May of 2022. I give her all the credit. It's keeping an open mind. Maybe someone does have something to offer. And so in terms of do's and don'ts, I'll just say quickly, I think do be curious. Do say, tell me more so you can learn, and do summarize what they said. You know, okay, I understand you to mean A, B, and C. Did I get that right? Because you can fake nodding and that sort of thing. You can't fake summarizing. It shows that you've been listening, shows that you're curious. In terms of the don'ts, don't sit around thinking about what you're going to say next, or the biggest flaw is listening for the flaw. Listening for them to make one mistake so you can drop some bomb on them, they're going to switch their mind. You don't. When you listen to persuade, you don't persuade. It's ironic. But when you listen to understand, you do persuade, because then they open their mind to what you have to say. And so if I could have one takeaway with listening, I would say redefine success. Success should be listening to understand someone's opinion, not changing it. The A is for act respectfully, despite differences. I gave you an example of McCain and Senator Graham and handling that. I'll just quickly give you some do's and don'ts. Don't roll your eyes, don't hurl insults, don't question another person's motives. Some do's, do make people feel seen, do make people feel heard, do stand up for people on the other side when they're unfairly trashed by people on your side, which is what McCain did. And then finally, the W is for wait. Wait 6 seconds after your challenge to avoid something called an amygdala hijack. And what I mean by that is, back in the caveman days, if you walked out of the cave and there was a saber-toothed tiger in the bushes to the right and there's a beautiful rainbow on your left, you would instantly know, because of the amygdala, that the saber-toothed tiger is there. It's there to save your life. And it takes over your body for about 6 seconds. That's how much long. Well, we haven't had saber-toothed tigers in Florida. We did have them, but we haven't had them here in 10,000 years. But the amygdala is still there, and it's activated whenever you're challenged physically, verbally, or your self-esteem is threatened. And that's where we have road rage. And if you can just chill for 6 seconds before you respond, the front part of your brain that's calm takes over. It gets the wheel. And most of those things that we regret saying happen during those 6 seconds. And so if someone writes you a nasty text or an email, I would say respond to it the next day when you're in a calm mood without a lot of adjectives. If you're in person, someone says something, I can tell you that research out of Stanford has something called a psychological sigh, where you just twice through your nose and breathe out. It kills about 6 seconds and it completely changes your physiology. Or you can kill time by saying, okay, I want to make sure I heard everything. But if you can wait 6 seconds and then respond, I think you'll be a lot happier with it.
If we apply that LAW principle in job talks, the Q&A session will be about 2 minutes long rather than an hour long. Thank you. This is really, really helpful. So what roles, I mean, we're somewhat rehashing, but what roles do questions and curiosity, because, I think being curious about the other person's viewpoint and really wanting to engage them try to interpret them to the best of your ability is really important. So tell us more about, from your own experience, what roles questions and curiosity have played for you.
I think that's super important because that's the key on the listening to understand. Listening makes you better liked. Listeners are better salesmen, better negotiators, better speed daters. Ironically, they study speed dating up at Harvard. Imagine you being on a date, you're a girl and you're on a date, and some guy spends the whole time talking about himself, doesn't ask you a single question, right? You're probably not gonna like it. Well, same thing with anything else. By asking questions, it shows that you're curious. And most people don't. I'll give you an example. If I said to you, sell me this pen, and I handed it to you, you would probably say, or if you're like most people, this pen is great, it rides upside down, it works in space, and blah, 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 blah. And you probably won't ask me any questions. And how would I sell this pen? How long have you been in the market for a pen? What kind of pen do you like? Tell me about it. What kind of pen do you usually buy? What's your budget? Do you like blue ink or black ink? If you ask me that, I would tell you, I like a pen that's a gel tip that writes super fast. It's 1.0 millimeter. This is it. And it's not super cheap, but it's not expensive either. And now you know my needs. Now you know. And when you're talking about politics, you can learn someone's values, whether something's fair, compassion, where it is. Asking questions shows interest. And if I could leave you with any one thing on this, it would be, it is better to be interested than it is it's better to be interested than interesting in every context.
Wow, yeah, just one-line zingers, one after another. That's great. So let's talk about some people then. Is there a current elected leader that you think is a good role model of what you're kind of proposing that we should try to be more like in civil discourse?
The best political leader I've seen in civil discourse during my time in Congress or since is a guy named Spencer Cox, who is the current governor of Utah. And I'll give you an example. You guys may remember this debate in 2000 between Biden and Trump, and it was so nasty. Commentators said it was the worst debate in American history. And in this debate, Trump kept telling Biden how dumb he is, and Biden called him a clown and told him to shut up. Well, Spencer Cox is seeing this, and he's running for governor for the first time. So he's like, what can I do? He picks up the phone and calls his Democratic opponent and says, I know this is not conventional. How about you and I film an ad together to say in Utah we work together, no matter which one of us wins. And he filmed that ad, and it went viral. And people connected to it. They were hungry for it. And he won again, and his peers made him the chairman of the National Governor Association, where he championed this issue of disagree better. And he came to Harvard recently, got a chance to meet with him, and he's the real deal. And I think the most important thing with civility is just modeling it, leading by example.
Spencer Cox, okay. Well, let's turn our attention to the future, because I mean, we're sitting in front of us are the future of our world, our nation. As we look to the future, do we have any reasons for hope? If so, why and how?
Believe it or not, I am hopeful. I'm optimistic. And I'll tell you 3 specific reasons why. Number 1, we have more in common than we have differences. Scientists at the Human Genome Project say that we are 99.99% similar. 99.99%. Yes, different eye color, different height, different religions, different political ideologies, but we're mostly similar. And I can tell you, for example, my experience at Harvard of hanging out with people face to face. I have optimism that if you get to know each other as people, and a good start is not over-identifying with your religion or political party, either one is fine, but thinking about what we have more in common is a better way to go. The second reason I am optimistic is that we are pre-wired genetically to connect. We are social animals. We want to connect. They did a Harvard happiness study that went for 85 years because they were trying to figure out what makes a person happy over long term. Is it looks, money, power, fame, wealth? What is it? And they found there's only one common denominator: is social connection. The people who are happy have good social relationships. So I can tell you, and as a practical thing, as students, what the research shows is that if you were to spend time with friends 4 days a week, face to face, it is the equivalent in terms of happiness to making an extra $100,000 a year. If you were to be lonely those 7 days and have no friends, talk to no one, it is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It will kill you. You don't have to be some big backslapping extrovert. It's fine to be an introvert, but you need to have at least one person that you're out meeting with and socializing with. And then finally, the third reason, and this is the one that I think is most important, is in the last few days, I have given these talks at UF. I met some students this morning at West Point and at Harvard. And I tell you, it renews my faith. Across the board, the young people I have met want to lift people up, bring people together. They're smart, they're respectful. I see a new generation coming up, and I think it's time to pass the baton. But when you hear all this criticism about kids today and stuff, when you meet these kids that I've met, you feel pretty good about it. I think there's reason for optimism.
Great. Okay. Well, let's turn to our last question because I want to give time for our audience to ask you some questions. So, if students could do only one thing, just one thing, what would that be? What would you suggest?
Turn off the cable television news, like completely. I went a year without it as part of my Harvard experience. Spencer Cox told me he and his wife haven't watched cable TV news in 13 years. And his mental health and happiness spiked, and mine did too. I would completely turn it off and get your news from other sources.
What are the sources?
Well, the sources that I think probably are most credible for me, I think the AP Wire is pretty good.
Okay.
That's, I think, my number one source. I think there's podcasters who call it down the middle. Megyn Kelly, she doesn't have a problem criticizing Trump or the Democrats. Just sources that you feel for you that can give you an independent view of things, and people that not going to stress you out.
Right. For me, it's AP and BBC, but
oh yeah,
I'm biased,
absolutely.
but
That's a good one. Yeah.
Anyway, this has been wonderful. So let's turn it over to our students or those joining from YouTube or here. So, and I think there's a mic that's going around as well. So yes, please, Sigma Nu.
Hi there. My name is Anthony Chervenkov, and I had a question regarding how to use this idea of disagreeing better, not necessarily within our nation, but also in global relations with other nations which we may feel are diametrically opposed to our values. How would you apply this idea of disagreeing better with a country that we are at extensive competition with without necessarily compromising our core values as a nation?
Well, what a wonderful question. Here's the simple answer, how I would apply it, is I don't have any criticism with the President of the United States picking up the phone and talking to the President of Cuba or Russia or North Korea or anyone else, Putin. I think we need to be able to have these conversations in a civil way, but I think there needs to be more communication, not less. And I think when we have someone in that slot that has those skills, pick up the phone and talk to people. And you don't have to have the same values. I don't know why it is, yes, Cuba's communist and China isn't, but some reason we can fly to China, but we can't to Cuba. I think more communication, more interaction is better, not less.
You said it is hard to hate from close up. That was brilliant. I wanted to ask you, you spoke a bit about how we have more in common than differences. Can you speak a little bit more on that?
Sure. We all share two common values. There's a researcher named Jonathan Haidt, kind of a famous professor, author, and those two values that every single person has, liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, black, white, Catholic, Protestant, Jew, are two things: fairness and compassion. We all have those things. And so when you're having a debate with someone or listening to someone, I want to know why. You have a particular view on a controversial issue, whatever it is, drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, whatever it is. I want to know the why behind it. And because if you listen to understand, you'll figure out that you share one of those values, that they may have a different what, but you're going to have the same why. And once you can figure that out, you can have more intelligent conversations where people are open-minded to each other. And the other thing is we have so much more in common in terms of our interest. I like yacht rock music. I love riding motorcycles. I love comedy. If you were sitting next to me on a plane and you mentioned any one of those three topics, I feel sorry for you because I'm going to be talking for 3 hours. Those are my things. Let's think about the things we have more in common with rather than things that make us different.
You said when becoming a good listener, you want to avoid questioning people's motives. Could you expand more on that?
What a great question. Here's one. So let's say I'm a member of Congress and someone has a bill, and this bill is to make the minimum wage $40 an hour, and they think that's some great thing. It would be okay to say, I think this bill is bad. I think it's bad for Florida. I think it's going to cost hundreds of jobs in the tourism industry across the board. That's okay. This is what's not okay. Oh, the reason you're championing this bill is because you got a $100,000 donation from the AFL-CIO. That's why you're doing it. That's not cool. And we see that way too often in politics, questioning another person's motives. They can say what they want, and you can have your differences, but don't question another person's motives.
Here? You want, yeah.
Hi, I know you spoke a lot on criticism. I was wondering, do you have like a personal story of when a critic wrote to you?
Yeah, all the time. I can, especially in politics, you have to have a thick skin. And this is the one thing I would say to you about criticism. First, I don't take anything personal at all. And I think we worry, a lot of people, we worry about criticism because we worry about what are other people going to think. You know, if somebody writes a letter to the editor and you're a politician and it's not nice about you, you think, oh my God, everybody believes it, everybody's seen it. And what I learned from being in politics is that they haven't seen it, and the people who do see it don't care. You know, they have mortgages and taxes and everything else problems. I think we spend too much time worrying about what other people think. And so if someone is critical to me or negative, it's not going to change the way I respond to them. I'm still going to be kind to them. That's all I can control. And I think they may switch it up, maybe they won't, but I can control what I can control. I'll tell you a funny experiment along these lines of the third-party validation. There's a teacher at Harvard who made us come to school wearing 2 different shoes. So I came to school wearing a white shoe and a black shoe all day. Went to all my classes. Some of my classes only have 10 people in it. And then the next week, she says, Rick, how many people came up to you and noticed your different shoes? I said, none. And she said, that's right. 95% of the people don't notice. And the 5% that do notice don't care. Yet we spend our whole life chasing third-party approval when nobody's watching. They're worried about their own shoes, not yours.
That's great. Yes?
I really enjoyed your stories about like you being in Congress and engaging with the other senators and representatives. Do you have any other stories that would be funny or you weren't able to fit into your speech?
Wow, I have a lot of good stories. I can tell you one that's kind of lighthearted, that's memorable for me. You know that hit, "Still the One." We're
Yes.
still having one.
Right,
Still
that's right.
Fun.
Shania Twain, I think.
Yeah, and there's another guy. There's a band called Orleans that had the first, that had the first hit, and
cool.
yeah, and Shania had one too. And so the guy who wrote that song, the rock star, gets elected to Congress, and he and I go to Iraq together, and I'm so excited because he's going to perform for the troops, and I go over to Iraq, and I eat something that's bad for me. I get E. coli poisoning, and I'm in the hospital. And while I'm in the hospital, he does his performance for the troops, and I don't get to see it. And I'm so bummed. And so now we're back on the plane a few days later, and he comes up to me and he says, "Hey, Rick, I heard you couldn't make it to the concert." I said, "I couldn't." He said, "You know what? How about I do a concert for just you?" And got the flight attendant there and me, and he pulled out his guitar and did all his greatest hits. And I thought to myself, it's never going to get better than this moment. And it hasn't. But it was a cool experience.
That's great.
Thank you for coming out and speaking today. Sorry, I'll just stand because I'm pretty far back. So we know politics has gotten a lot more divisive and divided, and we're seeing one of the most inefficient Congresses to really have ever exist because they're unwilling to work bipartisan for passing legislature. What would you say to both sides of the aisle in regards to civil discourse and making sure that we are working for the people and in favor of the people?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you what I would say to you as a voter. I think this issue has percolated up to be number one. And so if you're you have a choice in a primary election. Let's just say that you're Republican, and one person agrees with you 95% of the time, but is a bit of a jerk, doesn't play well with others. The other person is a legit leader who may agree with you 80% of the time, but he can work well with others. think long and hard before you vote for the 95% guy. Because I can tell you I vote differently now, because that's the one message that political parties and politicians can understand, winning and losing. And I think you're about to see in November, people aren't happy with this climate, and they're going to reflect it, and you're going to see it. But the best thing is us vote for the people to get the right people there in the first place. Because right now, if we have a fringe candidate who is elected from one side and a fringe candidate from the other side, and we get them to Washington and say, okay, play well with each other, they're not going to do it. You know, I was at a hearing, I was watching a hearing on TV, you probably saw it, and there's only two things you can't do in politics. You don't make fun of someone's kids, and you don't make fun of their appearance. And we had these two women on different parties, and one says, you have fake eyelashes, and the other was like, you have a, you know, bad built, bleach blonde, butch body. And I'm like, oh my God, how did it get to that?
Yes.
And I can tell you, if you listen to my principles, this is why it wouldn't have got to that. Because after that lady who started it, Marjorie Taylor Greene, said you have fake eyelashes, that's a violation of decorum.
Yes.
And there was a vote, and all the Republicans said it wasn't a violation of decorum because they needed her vote. And it was the exact opposite of McCain. It was their job at that point to stand up for the other side when you have insulted them, and they didn't. And so the other lady said something even more inflammatory, the bleach blonde, whatever it is, but it shouldn't even got to that. We should stand up for the other people when they're trash.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nikki. So in the recent climate online, it's become very popular for online debates to like bring a bunch of people of like very opposing opinions, and they create this climate where it's just everyone's yelling at each other and trying to get gotcha moments so we can post them online in 1 minute clips, and then it's very bad, right? On the other hand, a lot of younger people today are becoming more passionate about things that they've lived through and become close to them. So how can we disagree better when debates online show us a hostile environment and the issues these debates discuss are often somewhat personal or come from a place of passion?
What a wonderful question. First of all, I would ask yourself, is it worth interjecting myself into it? As I mentioned that Pew study, 73% of these tweets are by 6% of the people. And when they break down that 6%, it's the fringe of both sides, the exceedingly conservative and the exceedingly liberal. And so it's making it inflammatory. And so it's pretty hard to be civil when someone calls you a Nazi or a pedophile or whatever. I don't think you should engage. I don't think it's your job to say, I'm not going to let that stand. I wouldn't engage. I wouldn't spend your energy at all on it. In terms of in person, I think I would encourage you to have debates if it's worthwhile and it's an important issue to you, but just do it in a civil way. I just spoke to this group, Harvard Students for Bipartisan Solutions, half Republicans, half Democrats. I let them talk to each other. Very respectful, very respectful. And you can't guarantee how the other person is going to behave. Hopefully they do behave better, but I can tell you 100% you're going to feel better if you handle yourself that way.
Hi. Obviously, you have discussed this law, like acronym framework, primarily in a political and legal sense. I was wondering what impact has seeing things this way made on your personal life, you know, disagreeing with your friends, disagreeing with your family, that sort of thing.
It's wonderful. Yeah, these rules, the listening to understand, acting respectful, waiting 6 seconds, apply to your personal life just as good as they do. Absolutely. I'm not perfect. I've been through a divorce, and I can tell you, I just had my ex-wife to our home for Christmas. I'm crazy about her, and we get along great. Just because you've had differences doesn't mean you can't be civil with each other. So I think it's equally applicable whether it's your friend, whether it's your romantic partner. I think it's incredibly important to listen, to understand, and get their point of view, and not try to win an argument. There is no winning an argument, because if you humiliate someone or make them feel stupid, you're not going to change their mind, and you've damaged the relationship. So far better to have that civil conversation in your personal life. And even if you don't get them to agree with you, at least you've preserved the relationship. And there's a stat by a guy named John Gottman who studies personal relationships and marriage, and he says that in happy marriages, 69% of disagreements are never resolved. 7 out of 10 times they're not resolved. They don't have to be resolved. All they have to be is people that respect each other and are kind to each other.
Right here.
Thank you. You talked about having an open mind, such as your TED Talk story. I was curious, what is one maybe fun and unexpected thing you've learned from having an open mind and having conversations with these different groups of people at Harvard that you may not have had any previous similarities with?
Okay. I'll tell you something that you would never think that a Republican would say, but I've changed my mind having taken courses on it, researching it. There's something called ketamine, which is a psychedelic. I would think that would be horrible. I just associate it with friend juice. But it was approved by the FDA last year, and I've read all the studies why it instantly cures people from depression. Instantly. And it's not, doctors apply it and everything. I think that's a good thing now under that context. MDMA, which people refer to as Molly or ecstasy. I don't think you should be passing those out like M&Ms at raves, but I can tell you what the research says is they took veterans who were suicidal and nothing worked, and they gave them treatment under controlled circumstances with MDMA, and it cured 70% of them permanently. I'm open to a doctor at a VA clinic on a trial basis being able to help people with those type of things. So I think one of the things that surprises people is they don't realize that we are persuadable. I've changed my mind on so many things. I'll give you one. Justice Kennedy's here. When I was running for office, all the federal judges told me, no cameras in the courtroom. We don't want cameras in the courtroom, that's bad. And so I took that position, and then we went and had hearings on this issue, and I've completely flipped on that. I think cameras in the courtroom are a good thing. And I have met all of our Supreme Court justices, at least the ones that I was up when I was in office. And if you saw John Roberts at work, I think you'd be impressed. I think it'd make you feel better about the justice system, not less. But something I completely flipped on just by having an open mind and hearing both sides of it.
Tell me, so I'll ask you a question that. Tell us about when your principles do not work. Who are the likely people that you have a hard time engaging with? Because I mean, as you're telling me this, I've been thinking about my work at the Hamilton School. After 18 years at your alma mater, Vanderbilt, I left to come here.
Right.
No regrets, and yet there are some people who are really hard to deal with.
Yeah.
There's some people, I think my biggest takeaway is W. I was thinking to myself, only if I waited 6 seconds, 6 seconds, it would have made a world of difference in world history.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So teach me, please, how I can, do you do that well? You do that W well? Because that to me is like the biggest, because I think I tend to listen pretty empathetically and A and active, but W is the biggest problem for me.
Yeah, first of all, I think 9 out of 10 arguments aren't worth having because they're over trivial stuff. So I wouldn't have those in the first place. I think disagreement's great, but make sure it's worthwhile. I think it's funny you said that. I have some friends who are fantastic communicators, A to Z, perfect. The one thing they screw up is that W. It's waiting. Because you're just pre-wired. It just comes out, and you say things that you don't want. That's the one thing I think people need to make a conscious effort of. It's the one thing that takes energy. It's hard to do, especially when someone is attacking you personally. It's really hard to be chill and wait, but that's incredibly important. And I'll tell you this, if you screw it up and you say something you regret, I can't tell you how powerful apologies are if you know what you're doing. And it's really simple. Most people don't get it, but it's, I'm sorry, I feel horrible, and it won't happen again. And that third part is what really moves the needle. Because you can talk about what you can do in future. Right? Be willing to apologize. And worst case scenario, let's say it's somebody you have to work with, and you've done everything right. All you can do is handle your side of it. You don't have to do an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth. I think you can still handle yourself with dignity, and it's a great chance to show leadership to everybody around you.
On that wonderful note, I think we can give Ric Keller a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.